The M4 Sherman was supposed to burn. Everyone on both sides knew that. But on this gray Canadian dawn in Normandy, it refused to do what history expected of it. Mist clung to the hedgerows like damp wool as Sergeant Thomas Calder tightened his grip on the turret ring, knuckles pale beneath his gloves. The tank beneath him idled with a low, animal growl. It was an American-built machine, stamped by Detroit steel and factory logic, but today it wore a fresh maple leaf hastily painted over the star. A quiet act of ownership, a small declaration of defiance. Across the field, German binoculars tracked the Sherman's silhouette. "They'll knock it out," Unteroffizier Karl Weiss muttered from his Panzer IV's cupola. He had seen dozens die. Shermans were predictable, thin-skinned, loud, brave but fragile. The Germans had nicknames for them: Tommycoker, lighters. This one should have been no different. The first shot hit 600 meters. The round screamed, struck, and sparks exploded across the Sherman's glacis, but the tank didn't erupt. It didn't halt. It didn't even slow. Inside, the impact rang through Calder's bones. He tasted copper. Loader James Mickey, O'Rourke swore, already hauling another shell into place. "Still moving," the driver shouted. Calder exhaled once, then calmly said, "Gun up. Traverse right. Let's answer." The Sherman fired. The German Panzer recoiled, not from the hit, but from the audacity. This was wrong. This wasn't how Shermans behaved. They were meant to advance bravely and die loudly, not absorb fire and respond with precision. And somewhere in the German line, a whisper began to form. Something is different. The Sherman had not been captured in glory. 2 weeks earlier, it sat crippled near Caen, tracks blown, crew dead or evacuated. German infantry marked it for salvage. Another carcass. Another statistic. But the front shifted faster than expected. Canadian forces surged forward, reclaiming ground inch by bloody inch. Calder's unit found the Sherman half buried in mud, smoke-stained but intact. "Engine's good," the mechanic said, disbelief in his voice. "Armor?" "Scored. Not cracked." The Canadians didn't ask permission. They never did. They towed it, stripped it, rewired it, reinforced the weak points with field improvisation, extra track links, scavenged plating, sandbags arranged not by doctrine but by instinct. They modified optics, adjusted firing routines, changed crew coordination. They didn't rebuild the Sherman. They relearned it. Calder, formerly an infantryman, was chosen because he listened, because he adapted, because he didn't treat manuals like scripture. By the time the tank rolled out again, it looked wrong. Heavier, meaner, purpose-built. And when it re-entered combat, German observers noticed immediately. This Sherman didn't rush. It stalked me. Karl Weiss watched it through smoke and could not understand what he was seeing. It used cover intelligently. It coordinated with infantry too well. It waited, let others draw fire. Then it moved, short bursts, precise angles, gun always aligned before exposure. "This is not American," Weiss said quietly. His gunner hesitated. "Orders?" Weiss didn't answer right away. The Sherman fired again. Another Panzer burned. And for the first time, Weiss felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. Not fear, confusion. That night, German reports listed the engagement as anomalous. Enemy armor exhibited irregular survivability. Canadian crews showed atypical tactical patience. One Sherman appeared resistant to expected penetration. The word unhinged did not appear yet, but the hinge had loosened, and the door was starting to swing. Sergeant Calder did not believe in lucky tanks. He believed in crews. Inside the Sherman, sweat pooled despite the cold. The air smelled of oil, cordite, and metal that had been struck but refused to yield. Mickey O'Rourke patted the breech like a nervous habit. "She took that hit like a champ," he said. Calder didn't smile. "She took it because we let her." Canadian doctrine was flexible by necessity. They lacked numbers. They compensated with adaptation. Where American units trusted mass and momentum, the Canadians learned restraint, waiting for the exact second when the enemy committed. The Sherman became their experiment. They drilled relentlessly. Faster reloads. Silent signals. Internal timing was so tight they barely needed words. Calder made them rehearse worst-case scenarios until panic lost its grip. "You hesitate, you die," he said. "You improvise, you live." They welded spare armor at angles no manual approved. They adjusted ammo storage to reduce fire risk. They learned when to fight hull down, and when to charge only after the enemy blinked. The Sherman stopped being expendable. It became deliberate. German crews began to talk. Not officially. Not in reports. In whispers over cigarettes. In glances exchanged after failed ambushes. There is a Sherman with Canadian markings. It does not burn. It waits. It learns. Weiss encountered it again near a ruined village. This time, his first shot missed, because Sherman anticipated it. The Canadian tank reversed before the trigger pull. That should not have been possible. Weiss felt sweat run down his spine as the Sherman reappeared from another angle entirely. That tank is wrong, his gunner said. Weiss didn't correct him. The Sherman fired. The Panzer survived, but barely. And as Weiss ordered retreat, the word finally surfaced, spoken half as a joke, half as a warning. Unhinged. The nickname stuck. Not because the Sherman was invincible, but because it refused to behave like a Sherman. And in war, predictability is comfort. This tank offered none. By late July, the Sherman no longer needed introductions. It announced itself in subtler ways, by the sudden silence of German guns, by infantry pulling back too early, by Panzer crews waiting a heartbeat longer than doctrine allowed. In battle, a heartbeat was an eternity. Sergeant Thomas Calder noticed it first during a dawn engagement near Verrier's Ridge. The Canadians advanced cautiously, infantry hugging the folds of the land. The Sherman crept forward last, engine throttled low, turret already angled where Calder knew resistance would emerge. And then nothing. No muzzle flashes. No probing fire. No Panzer counterstroke. Where are they? Mickey muttered, peering through the sight. Calder didn't answer. His eyes narrowed. They're watching, he said. They're waiting for us. That was new. German armor doctrine thrived on aggression, strike first, hit hard, break momentum. Yet here they were, holding fire, letting a Canadian Sherman roll forward unchallenged. Until it stopped. Calder raised his fist. The tank froze. Seconds passed. Then a German anti-tank gun fired, late, rushed, inaccurate. The shell tore through empty ground where the Sherman had been moments earlier. Calder didn't shout. Didn't curse. Traverse. Fire. The Canadian round destroyed the gun in one clean shot. From a shattered farmhouse, Unteroffizier Karl Weiss watched through dust and disbelief. His unit had been ordered to wait, to let the Sherman commit, to lure it into a kill zone. But it hadn't. It had baited them instead. That's it, Weiss whispered. They're not guessing anymore. The Germans began adjusting their reports, not officially admitting fear, but acknowledging unpredictability. The Canadian Sherman exhibits non-standard engagement patterns. Crew coordination exceeds expected limits. Enemy armor appears tactically patient to a disturbing degree. Disturbing. That word appeared again and again. Calder's crew felt the shift too. Fewer reckless charges. More traps. More layered defenses. The enemy was learning, but slower than the Canadians. One afternoon, a young infantry lieutenant approached the Sherman after an engagement. They pulled back just because you showed, he said. Didn't even fire. Mickey grinned. Good. Less work for us. Calder didn't share the humor. They're scared, he said quietly. And scared men do desperate things. The next engagement proved him right. Outside Falaise, German forces attempted an ambush designed specifically for that Sherman. Hidden Panthers. Overlapping fields of fire. Infantry with Panzerfausts dug deep into the hedgerows. Weiss was there again. This time, his commander said, we end it. The Sherman rolled forward. Too forward. Calder felt it immediately. The air was wrong. Too quiet. Too deliberate. Stop, he ordered. The driver hesitated. Sir, stop. Reverse 5 meters. The first Panther fired. The shell tore past the Sherman's nose, missing by inches. The second shot never came, because the Sherman had already moved. Calder swung the turret and fired smoke, not at the Panthers, but at the infantry positions. Confusion rippled outward. The Canadians didn't push. They withdrew, slowly, deliberately, drawing German armor out of concealment. Canadian artillery answered seconds later. When the smoke cleared, 2 Panthers burned. Weiss survived, but his hands shook as he climbed from the wreckage of a half-destroyed support vehicle. That tank, a soldier muttered nearby. It thinks. Weiss said nothing. Because that was the most terrifying truth of all. The word finally entered the official German language after the battle at Chambois. It appeared scribbled in the margins of a damage assessment, underlined twice. Unhinged. Not mad. Not reckless. Unhinged, as in disconnected from expectation. From doctrine. From logic. The Sherman no longer fit the mental map German crews relied on to survive. Calder's tank had become something else, not because of steel but because of intent. The Canadians treated it less like armor and more like a living extension of the battlefield. They coordinated with infantry instinctively, pulled back when others would charge, charged when retreat was expected. They broke patterns, and broken patterns shattered confidence. Inside the Sherman, the crew felt it too. Mickey stopped joking as much. The driver slept in fragments. Calder stared at maps longer than necessary, replaying engagements in his mind. "They'll throw everything at us," Mickey said one night. "We're a problem now." Calder nodded. "Good. Means we matter." The Germans tried once more. A concentrated strike. Panthers, assault guns, infantry swarming the flanks. It was meant to crush the anomaly, to restore order. Weiss was reassigned to the operation, despite his objections. "That Sherman has survived too long," his commander said. "End it." The battlefield erupted. Shells screamed. Earth lifted. Men vanished. The Sherman took a hit to the turret, hard enough to ring Calder's skull, but it didn't penetrate. Another slammed into the side armor, buckling plates, knocking Mickey off his feet. "Load her down," someone shouted. Mickey scrambled up. Blood ran from his eyebrow. "I'm good," he snapped. "Load." The Sherman fired at point-blank range. A Panther died. Then another. German infantry hesitated just long enough. That was all Calder needed. "Advance." The Sherman surged forward through smoke and flame, not charging blindly but deciding. It crushed the cover. It shattered resistance. It refused to be fixed in place. Weiss fired once. Missed. The Sherman's gun swung toward him. For a split second, Weiss locked eyes with the tank's commander through optics, saw not rage, not madness, but clarity. The shell destroyed his position. Weiss survived again, but his war ended there. Afterward, German prisoners spoke openly. That Sherman is unhinged. It does not follow rules. It hunts. The reputation spread faster than the tank ever could. And if you're gripping this moment with me, right here where steel and nerve decide everything, make sure to hit subscribe. There's more ahead, and the end of this story cuts deeper than you expect. The Sherman rolled on. Scarred. Dented. Alive. By the time the Falaise Pocket closed, German resistance collapsed not just from encirclement, but exhaustion. Mental exhaustion. The sense that nothing behaved as it should anymore. One tank had helped tip that balance. Not by being stronger, but by being unpredictable. By August, the M4 Sherman no longer moved as a single vehicle. It moved as an idea. German crews reacted to it before they saw it, shifting guns, calling in artillery too early, abandoning firing positions the moment a Canadian silhouette appeared through dust or hedgerow. The Sherman had carved a hollow space in the enemy's confidence, and everything around that space bent unnaturally. Sergeant Thomas Calder felt the weight of it pressing down on him. He didn't speak of heroism. He didn't speak of legacy. But at night, when the engine cooled and the crew lay scattered around the tank, he replayed every choice he had made. Every deviation from doctrine. Every gamble that had paid off so far. "Do you ever think about what happens when luck runs out?" the driver asked quietly one evening. Calder stared at the Sherman's scarred hull. "Luck didn't get us here," he said. "Attention did." The Canadians pushed toward the Seine. Resistance stiffened in pockets, desperate, fragmented, violent. German units were no longer coordinating cleanly. Orders contradicted each other. Armor arrived late or not at all. The Sherman entered a town whose name no one remembered afterward. German infantry fired wildly. A Panzer IV lurked behind rubble, waiting for the expected Canadian charge. It never came. The Sherman stopped outside town limits. Waited. Calder watched dust drift. Watched shadows shift. He imagined what the Germans expected, and refused to give it to them. Instead, Canadian infantry slipped in from the flanks. Mortars spoke. Smoke rolled. Only then did the Sherman move, slowly, deliberately, straight into the enemy's doubt. The Panzer fired too late. Sherman answered once. That was enough. Afterward, a captured German officer stared at the tank and shook his head. "This is not how you use a Sherman," he said. Calder met his gaze. "Then stop expecting us to." German after-action reports became increasingly detached from reality. The Canadian Sherman behaves irrationally. Enemy armor acts independently of supporting units. Tank morale appears contagious. Morale. As if a machine could inspire it. But morale was never about metal. It was about belief. The Sherman's last major fight came without ceremony. No grand objective, no sweeping maneuver, just a battered road, a collapsing German line, and the grinding exhaustion of men who had been at war too long. The tank's engine sputtered that morning. A mechanic warned it might not last the day. Calder nodded. Then we won't waste it. German forces attempted one final counterattack, thin, poorly coordinated, but vicious. Assault guns fired from Trillions. Infantry surged with Panzerfausts, shouting more from fear than fury. The Sherman moved to block the road. A Panzerfaust struck the side armor. Plates buckled. The interior was filled with dust and smoke. Fire! Calder shouted. They fired. Again. And again. Each shot bought seconds. Each second mattered. The Sherman took another hit, this one worse. The turret jammed halfway through rotation. Mickey slammed his fist against the mechanism. She's done, Sarge. Calder looked out through the periscope. Saw Canadian infantry pinned down behind shallow cover. He made the decision without ceremony. Driver, he said calmly, forward. The Sherman lurched ahead, turret frozen, gun useless, but hull still intact. It became a shield instead of a spear. German fire focused on it instantly. That was the point. Canadian troops moved. Artillery fell. The counterattack collapsed. When the firing stopped, the Sherman sat immobile, smoking gently, scarred beyond recovery. But standing. Calder climbed out last. He rested a hand on the hull. That's enough, he whispered. German prisoners stared at the wrecked tank with something close to reverence. That one, a soldier said, we were warned about. The Sherman never fired again. But it didn't need to. After the war, analysts searched for reasons. They examined armor thickness, crew training, tactical deviations. None fully explained it, because the truth was simpler and harder to accept. The M4 Sherman became unhinged in German eyes not because it changed, but because the Canadians refused to let it be predictable. They broke rhythm, broke expectations, broke the quiet contract of war where each side assumes the other will behave correctly. German doctrine depended on pattern recognition. The Sherman erased patterns. That was the real damage. Long after the tank was scrapped, German veterans spoke of it, not with hatred, but with unease. It didn't act like a Sherman, they said. It didn't die when it should have. It made us hesitate. And hesitation kills. Calder returned home quietly. He never claimed anything extraordinary. When asked about the tank, he shrugged. We just listened, he said. Most people don't. The Sherman never got a name. It didn't need one. History remembered it anyway.